Sign the divorce papers or I'll make sure you never see another dime. Her husband Marcus hissed, throwing the documents at her feet. But when the lawyer opened the envelope containing the DNA results, Marcus's face went ghost white. "That's impossible," he whispered, his hands trembling. "The child you rejected," the lawyer said coldly, "is the only thing standing between your family and complete destruction." They say betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from the one who promised to protect you. This is the story of Shanice Walker, a woman who lost everything in a single moment only to discover that her pain was just the beginning of a much darker truth. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you, don't forget to subscribe and tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. Shanice Walker was 25 years old when she believed her life was finally falling into place. She lived in Memphis, Tennessee, in a historic neighborhood where magnolia trees lined the streets and jazz music drifted through open windows on summer nights. She worked as a school counselor at a local elementary school, spending her days helping children navigate their fears and dreams. Shanice had always been soft-spoken, the kind of woman who listened more than she talked, who noticed the quiet suffering others missed. She met Marcus Reed when she was just 21, fresh out of college and full of hope. Marcus was everything she thought she wanted, confident, successful, and from a family that commanded respect throughout the South. The Reeds owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across 3 states, and Marcus was being groomed to take over the empire his grandfather had built from nothing. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Marcus pursued her with an intensity that made her feel like the most important person in the world. Expensive dinners, weekend trips, promises whispered under starlit skies. Within 8 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony at the Reed family estate, with 500 guests and coverage in the local society pages. But the fairy tale crumbled quickly. After the wedding, Marcus changed. The attentive boyfriend became a distant husband. He worked late constantly, took calls at all hours, and looked at Shanice as if she were an obligation rather than a choice. His mother, Claudette Reed, made no secret of her disappointment that her son had married beneath his station. "She's pretty enough," Claudette told her friends at a charity luncheon, her voice carrying across the room intentionally. "But breeding matters. You can't buy class, and you certainly can't marry into it." Shanice endured the comments, the cold shoulders, the way that Marcus's family treated her like hired help at their own gatherings. She told herself it would get better. She told herself love could survive anything. When she discovered she was pregnant, she thought maybe this was the answer. A child would bring them together. A grandchild would soften Claudette's heart. She was wrong on both counts. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Constant nausea, debilitating fatigue, and a loneliness that settled into her bones like winter frost. Marcus barely acknowledged her condition. He didn't come to doctor's appointments. He didn't ask about the baby. He stayed late at work, and when he came home, he reeked of perfume that wasn't hers. Shanice knew. Of course she knew. But knowing and confronting are 2 different acts of courage, and she wasn't ready for that battle while carrying his child. The night she went into labor, Marcus was at a business dinner. She called him 12 times. He didn't answer once. Finally, she called his assistant, a young woman named Brittany, who always seemed to know exactly where Marcus was. "He said he's busy," Brittany said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "He'll come when he can." Shanice's neighbor, Mrs. Roberta Hayes, drove her to the hospital. The elderly woman held her hand in the waiting room, prayed over her, and promised her everything would be all right. "That baby is blessed," Mrs. Hayes whispered. "I can feel it." The labor lasted 14 hours. She screamed until her voice gave out. The nurses were kind but overworked, rushing between patients with the efficiency of people who'd seen too much suffering to linger on any single story. When her son finally emerged into the world, tiny and perfect, and wailing with indignation, Shanice wept. "You're here," she whispered to him. You're finally here." They cleaned him up and placed him on her chest. He had a head of dark curls and eyes that seemed to look right through her soul. She counted his fingers, his toes, memorized every detail of his face. "What will you name him?" a nurse asked. "Elijah," Shanice said. "It means the Lord is my God, because God is all we have." Marcus arrived 3 hours later. He walked into the recovery room wearing a tailored suit, smelling of cigars and expensive cologne. Behind him came Claudette, dressed as if she were attending a board meeting, and Marcus's younger brother Julian, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "You're late?" Shanice said quietly, her voice hoarse from screaming. Marcus didn't apologize. He walked over to the bassinet where Elijah slept and stared down at him for a long moment. His expression was unreadable. "He's beautiful," Julian offered, trying to break the tension. "Congratulations, brother." Marcus didn't respond. He kept staring at the baby, and something in his face shifted. It wasn't joy. It wasn't pride. It was something darker. "What is it?" Shanice asked, her heart beginning to pound with a fear she didn't understand. "He doesn't look like me," Marcus said flatly. The room went silent. "What are you talking about?" Shanice tried to sit up, but the pain from delivery made her fall back on the pillows. "He's a newborn. Babies don't—" "He doesn't look like anyone in my family." Claudette stepped forward. Her eyes narrowed as she examined Elijah like he was a piece of merchandise with a defect. "Marcus is right. The features are all wrong." "All wrong?" Shanice's voice cracked. "He's your grandson." "Is he?" Claudette's tone was ice. "Because looking at him, I have serious doubts." "How dare you?" "Don't raise your voice to my mother," Marcus snapped. "You owe her respect." "I owe her respect? Where's my respect? I just gave birth to your son and you walk in here accusing me of—" "I'm not accusing you of anything." Marcus's voice was calm, which somehow made it worse. "I'm stating facts. That child doesn't carry Reed features. I want a paternity test." The words hit Shanice like a physical blow. "You think I cheated on you?" "I think we need proof before I sign any birth certificate." "Marcus, please." Tears streamed down her face. "Look at me. Look at your son. How can you—" "I'm not signing anything until I have proof." He turned to Claudette. "Mother, call our attorney. I want this handled properly." "Already done," Claudette said, pulling out her phone. "I suspected this might happen." Shanice looked at Julian, desperate for an ally. "Julian, please, tell him he's being crazy." Julian shifted uncomfortably. "Shanice, maybe it's better to just do the test. Clear everything up, then there's no question." "No question? There should be no question. I'm his wife. I've never been with anyone else." But they weren't listening. Marcus and Claudette were already in the hallway, making phone calls, arranging tests, planning their legal strategy as if Shanice and Elijah were problems to be solved rather than family to be loved. A nurse came in with discharge papers. "Mrs. Reed, you'll be able to go home tomorrow morning. Do you have someone who can help you with the baby?" Shanice looked at the empty doorway where her husband had been. "No," she whispered. "I don't have anyone." That night, alone in her hospital room with Elijah sleeping in her arms, Shanice made a decision. Whatever happened next, whatever Marcus and his family tried to do, she would protect her son. She didn't know yet that the truth waiting to be uncovered was far more devastating than any accusation of infidelity. She didn't know that her husband's rejection was just the first crack in a foundation built on lies. And she definitely didn't know that within a week, the man she married would be begging for her forgiveness, even though forgiveness was no longer something she had to give. The discharge from the hospital felt like a walk of shame. Shanice gathered her belongings with shaking hands while Elijah slept in the standard-issue hospital bassinet. No flowers decorated her room, no balloons celebrated the new arrival, just sterile white walls and the lingering scent of antiseptic. Mrs. Hayes came to pick her up, her face tight with barely concealed anger. "That boy and his mama should be ashamed," she muttered, helping Shanice into the wheelchair hospital policy required. "A man who won't claim his own child ain't no man at all." Shanice said nothing. Her voice had disappeared somewhere between Marcus's accusations and Claudette's cold examination of her newborn son. She felt hollow, scraped clean of everything except a fierce determination to survive. The apartment Marcus had bought for them before the wedding now felt like a prison. It was in an upscale neighborhood, all granite countertops and hardwood floors, but it had never felt like home. Shanice had tried to make it warm with throw pillows and family photos, but you can't manufacture comfort in a space built on lies. Marcus didn't come home that first night, or the second. His attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Bowman, called instead. "Mrs. Reed, we need to schedule the paternity test as soon as possible. My son is 3 days old. I understand, but my client has rights. He's entitled to know. Your client is my husband. He should know without a test." Patricia's sigh carried the weight of countless similar conversations. "Mrs. Reed, I'm going to be frank with you. This will be easier for everyone if you cooperate. Fighting it will only make you look guilty." "Guilty of what? Being faithful?" "Guilty of trying to trap a wealthy man with another man's child." The words landed like slaps. Shanice hung up without responding. That afternoon, Claudette appeared at the apartment without warning. She walked in as if she owned the place, which technically she did. The deed was in the Reed family trust, another detail Shanice had overlooked in her rush to believe in fairy tales. "We need to talk," Claudette announced, settling herself on the ivory sofa Shanice wasn't allowed to let Elijah near because it was too expensive for baby stains. "Excuse me? Get out." Shanice's voice was quiet but carried a steel edge Claudette had never heard before. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "This isn't your house. It's my son's house. Everything you have because of us." "Then I'll leave. I'll take nothing, but I'm keeping my son." Claudette stood, her expression hardening into something cruel. "You'll regret this. When the test proves that child isn't Marcus's, you'll have nothing, no money, no support, no family. You'll be exactly what you were before my son made the mistake of marrying you. Nobody." After Claudette left, Shanice sat in the nursery she had decorated with such hope months ago. Soft yellow walls, hand-painted clouds on the ceiling, a mobile with little elephants that played a lullaby. She had imagined Marcus standing here with her, both of them watching their son sleep, planning his future, building a family. Instead, she was alone. Elijah woke up crying, hungry and needing to be changed. Shanice went through the motions mechanically, her mind elsewhere. As she fed him, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. The shape of his eyes, the curve of his chin. He did look like Marcus. Not obviously, not in the way people might notice immediately, but she could see it. Or was she just desperate to see it? The doubt crept in like poison. Had something happened that she couldn't remember? Had there been a night when she drank too much, when Marcus had left her alone at a party when... No, she would remember. She had to remember. But the harder she tried to be certain, the more uncertain she became. The paternity test was scheduled for the following Monday. Shanice took Elijah to the clinic alone, a nondescript medical building on the edge of downtown Memphis. The technician was professional but cold, swabbing his tiny mouth, sealing the samples, explaining the timeline. "Results take about 3 to 5 business days," she said. "They'll be sent directly to the requesting party's attorney." "Can I get a copy?" "You'll need to request that through legal channels." Of course she would. Even the test results would be filtered through Marcus's lawyers, controlled by his money, shaped by his narrative. That week stretched out like years. Shanice barely slept. Elijah's feeding schedule kept her up every few hours, but even when he slept, she couldn't. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how her life had collapsed so completely. Mrs. Hayes brought groceries. "You eaten enough, baby. You look like a ghost." "I'm fine." "You not fine, but you will be. God don't give us more than we can carry." "I'm not sure I believe that anymore." Mrs. Hayes sat down beside her, taking her hand. "I know it don't feel like it now, but there's a reason for all this. Sometimes things gotta fall apart so they can be put together the right way." On Thursday afternoon, Patricia Bowman called. "We have the results." Shanice's heart stopped. "And?" "Mr. Reed would like to meet with you tomorrow at 2 p.m. His mother and brother will be present, as will I. We'll discuss the findings then." "Just tell me now. Is he the father or not?" Patricia paused. "That's not a conversation for the phone. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., Mrs. Reed. Don't be late." That night, Shanice couldn't eat. She stared at Elijah while he slept, memorizing his face, wondering if tomorrow would be the day she lost everything or gained it back. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, she dressed in her best outfit, a simple navy dress that Marcus had once said made her look elegant. She fed Elijah, changed him, wrapped him in the soft blue blanket her mother had sent from Atlanta. The Reed family estate loomed before her like a fortress. She had been here dozens of times for dinners and parties, but never had it felt so hostile. The gates opened automatically as if the house itself was swallowing her whole. Marcus met her at the door. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. Shanice. Shanice. They stood there for a moment, two strangers who once promised each other forever. "Come to the study," he finally said. "Everyone's waiting." The study was all dark wood and leather furniture, walls lined with books no one actually read. Claudette sat in a wingback chair like a queen on a throne. Julian was standing by the window, his back to the room. Patricia Bowman had papers spread across the desk. And there was someone else, a man Shanice had never seen before, tall and distinguished with silver hair and kind eyes. He wore a white coat with a hospital ID badge. "Mrs. Reed, I'm Dr. Lawrence, geneticist," he said, extending his hand. "I'm the geneticist who reviewed your son's DNA results." "Just tell me," Shanice said with her voice barely above a whisper. "Is Marcus the father?" Dr. Lawrence looked at Patricia, who nodded. He opened a folder and pulled out a document covered in charts and numbers that meant nothing to Shanice. According to the DNA analysis, Marcus Reed is not the biological father of your son. The room tilted. Shanice grabbed the edge of the desk to keep from falling. "However," Dr. Lawrence continued, his voice gentle, "there is something unusual in the results that I need to explain." "What could possibly need explanation?" Claudette snapped. "The test is negative. She cheated. We're done here." "Mrs. Reed, the elder Mrs. Reed, with all due respect, it's not that simple." Dr. Lawrence turned to Shanice. "Your son shares DNA with the Reed family." "That's impossible," Marcus said. "You just said—" "I said you're not the father, but the child is related to your family. The genetic markers indicate a close familial connection." The silence in the room was absolute. Julian turned from the window, his face pale. Claudette stood up slowly, her hand at her throat. Marcus looked like he might be sick. "What are you saying?" Shanice whispered. Dr. Lawrence took a breath. "I'm saying that Elijah's biological father is someone closely related to Marcus. A father, a brother, an uncle. Someone with shared genetics." Claudette made a sound like a wounded animal. Marcus turned to his brother. "Julian?" "No!" Julian's voice cracked. "I swear I never— Marcus, you have to believe me." "Then who?" Marcus's voice was rising. "Dad's been dead for 3 years. There's no one else." But even as he said it, Shanice saw the realization creeping across his face. Saw the moment he understood something he didn't want to believe. No. No, that's not possible. Claudette moved toward the door. This meeting is over. Mother! Marcus grabbed her arm. What did he do? Let go of me. What did father do? The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire everyone had pretended wasn't burning. And then Claudette said the words that would shatter everything they thought they knew. Your father didn't die in a car accident. He's alive, and he's been living under a different name for the past 3 years. The confession hung in the air like shattered glass, each shard reflecting a different lie. Shanice felt the room spinning, her grip on Elijah tightening, as if he might disappear if she let go. What did you just say? Marcus's voice was barely recognizable, stripped of all its usual confidence. Claudette's composure cracked. For the first time since Shanice had known her, the woman looked old, fragile, human. Your father is alive. He's been alive this whole time. Julian stumbled backward, catching himself on the window frame. The funeral. We buried him. I gave a eulogy. How? You buried an empty casket. Claudette's voice was flat, mechanical, as if she'd rehearsed these words 1,000 times in her mind, but never thought she'd have to speak them aloud. Your father had debts. Gambling debts to people who don't forgive and don't forget. He owed over $3 million to a syndicate in Atlanta. They were going to kill him. Kill all of us. Patricia Bowman stood up Ripley. Mrs. Reed, I strongly advise you not to continue this conversation without your own attorney present. It's too late for attorneys. Shanice deserves to know what kind of family she married into. Where is he? Marcus demanded. Where's my father? Memphis. He never left Memphis. He's been here the whole time, living under the name Sterling Matthews. The name meant nothing to Shanice, but Marcus went rigid. The developer, the one who's been buying up properties in Orange Mound, the one you've been meeting with for months about the dealership expansion. Claudette didn't respond, which was answer enough. Shanice felt something inside her break loose, a terrible understanding flooding in. When, she said quietly, and everyone turned to look at her. When did you introduce me to him? I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Shanice's voice was getting stronger, fueled by a rage she didn't know she possessed. You introduced me to Sterling Matthews at the charity gala last year. You told me he was a business associate, that Marcus should get to know him better. The memory came rushing back with sickening clarity. The elegant ballroom, champagne flowing freely, Claudette's hand on her elbow guiding her toward a distinguished man with silver hair and Marcus's eyes. Sterling, this is my daughter-in-law, Shanice. Isn't she lovely? He'd kissed her hand, complimented her dress, asked about her work with such genuine interest that she'd felt seen for the first time in months. Marcus had been distant that entire evening, preoccupied with his phone, barely acknowledging her existence. He asked me to dance, Shanice continued, the pieces falling into horrible place. Marcus didn't want to, so Sterling offered. You encouraged it. You said it would be good for business relationships. Shanice, Marcus started, but she cut him off. I had champagne. Too much champagne. I wasn't used to drinking, and I was so lonely, and your mother kept refilling my glass. I remember feeling dizzy. I remember Sterling offering to show me the garden, so the fresh air would help. The air became deathly silent. I remember roses, the smell of roses and cigarette smoke. I remember sitting on a bench, and then nothing. I woke up in our bed the next morning with the worst headache of my life. Marcus, you were already gone. You left early for a meeting. Marcus looked like he was going to be sick. Oh, God.
Your father drugged me. The words came out hollow, factual. Your father raped me. And you all knew. We didn't know, Julian shouted. I swear, Shanice, we didn't. Your mother knew. Shanice turned to Claudette with eyes like steel. You set it up. You made sure I was vulnerable. You gave him access to me. Why? Claudette's mask finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face, cutting through her perfect makeup. Because he said he'd come back. He said if I helped him, if I gave him what he wanted, he'd come home. I just wanted my husband back. So, you fed him your son's wife. Shanice's voice was ice. What kind of monster are you? I didn't know he would. I thought he just wanted to meet you, to see what Marcus had chosen. I didn't know he'd. She couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Lawrence, who had been standing silently through all of this, cleared his throat. I should also mention that there's a genetic condition that appears in Elijah's DNA. It's a rare marker that's been passed down through the Reed family line. Your husband, your real husband, he looked at Claudette, suffered from it. Marcus, you're a carrier, but don't express it. Elijah has the active form. What does that mean? Shanice asked, her voice small again. It means he'll need treatment, specialized medication, regular monitoring. Without it, there could be developmental delays, organ problems. But with proper care, he can live a normal life. How much does treatment cost? Dr. Lawrence hesitated. The medication alone runs about $4,000 a month. That's not including doctor visits, tests. We'll pay for it, Marcus said immediately. Everything. Whatever he needs. You'll pay for it? Shanice laughed, but there was no humor in it. You rejected him. You called him a bastard. You accused me of destroying your family, and now you want to play hero? Shanice, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You believed the worst of me without question. Your mother handed me to a monster on a silver platter, and you were so busy with your business deals and your mistresses that you didn't even notice your wife had been violated. The word hung heavy in the air. Violated. Raped. Drugged. Destroyed. Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. I'm sorry. God, Shanice, I'm so sorry. You're sorry it doesn't fix this. Your sorry doesn't give me back the night I can't remember. Your sorry doesn't erase the fact that I carried a child conceived in violence and was abandoned by everyone who should have protected me. Patricia Bowman started gathering her papers. I'm leaving. This is beyond my scope of practice. Mrs. Reed, the younger Mrs. Reed, you need a criminal attorney. What's been described here is multiple felonies, sexual assault, conspiracy, fraud regarding the staged death. I want to see him, Shanice said suddenly. I want to see the man who did this to me. Sterling, Victor, whatever he calls himself. I want to look him in the face and tell him exactly what he took from me. That's not a good idea, Patricia warned. If this goes to trial, if? You mean when? I'm pressing charges. Against him, against her, against anyone who knew and said nothing. Claudette collapsed into her chair, sobbing. I didn't think he would hurt you. I swear. I thought he just... You thought you could use me as bait to get your husband back. You thought my body, my safety, my life was worth less than your comfortable lie. You're right about one thing, Claudette. I was beneath your son, because your entire family is so morally bankrupt that there's no level I could sink to that would match your depravity. Julian spoke up, his voice shaking. Shanice, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I didn't know. About Dad being alive, about what he did to you, I swear on everything I love, I didn't know. She looked at him, this younger brother who'd always been kind to her in small ways, who'd at least tried to be human when the rest of his family treated her like furniture. I believe you, she said finally, which is why I'm telling you now, get away from them. Whatever love you think you owe this family, it's not worth what it costs. Shanice stood, adjusting Elijah in her arms. The baby was awake now, looking around with wide, curious eyes, completely unaware that his entire existence had been born from trauma. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "Away from here. Away from all of you." "Shanice, wait. Please. Let me help. Let me make this right." "You can't make this right, Marcus. There is no right anymore. There's just survival." She walked toward the door, but Marcus moved to block her path. "I'll find him, my father. I'll make him pay for what he did. Step aside. Let me help you. The only thing you can do for me is tell me where he is. Where does Sterling live?" Marcus looked at his mother. Claudette was still crying, but she managed to whisper an address. "He has an apartment downtown, the Peabody Residences, Unit 1407. Shanice memorized the address. Then she looked at each of them in turn. Claudette with her tears and her designer clothes, Marcus with his guilt and his privilege, Julian with his helplessness. "I loved you," she said to Marcus. "I really did. I thought we were building something real, but this family is rotten from the inside out. Your father is a rapist, your mother is his accomplice, and you, Marcus, you're so weak that you let them destroy the one person who actually loved you for who you were, not what you had." She walked past him, through the grand foyer with its crystal chandelier, out the front door into the humid Memphis afternoon. Mrs. Hayes was waiting in her old Buick, engine running. "How'd it go, baby?" "Drive," Shanice said, climbing into the passenger seat with Elijah. "Just drive." As they pulled away from the Reed estate, Shanice looked back one last time. She saw Marcus standing in the doorway, watching her leave. She wondered if he understood that he'd lost her the moment he chose to believe she was capable of betrayal while refusing to see the betrayal happening all around him. That night, in Mrs. Hayes' spare bedroom, Shanice fed Elijah and made a list. At the top, she wrote, things to do. Number 1, find a criminal attorney. Number 2, file police report. Number 3, get restraining order against Victor Reed/Sterling Matthews. Number 4, get Elijah's medical treatment set up. Number 5, divorce Marcus. Number 6, survive. She stared at that last word for a long time. Survive. It seemed like such a small goal, but right now it was everything. She wasn't thinking about justice yet. She wasn't thinking about revenge. She was just thinking about how to make it through each day with her son in her arms and her sanity intact. Mrs. Hayes knocked softly and entered with a cup of tea. "You need rest, baby. I need answers. You'll get them, but not tonight. Tonight you need to heal." Shanice looked down at Elijah, this innocent child born from violence, but made of love despite it all. He looked back at her with eyes that were undeniably Reed eyes, carrying the genetic legacy of a family that had tried to destroy them both. "I'm going to burn their whole world down," she whispered. Mrs. Hayes sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "I know, baby, but first you gotta build yourself back up. Can't fight from a position of weakness. I'm tired of being weak. You ain't weak, you're wounded. There's a difference. Weakness is giving up. You still here, still holding that baby, still planning your next move. That ain't weakness. That's strength they can't even comprehend." Shanice leaned into the older woman's embrace and let herself cry for the first time since the hospital. She cried for the marriage that never really was. She cried for the innocence she'd lost that night at the gala. She cried for Elijah, who had grown up knowing his conception was a crime. But beneath the tears, something harder was forming. A resolve made of iron and fire. They thought they'd broken her. They thought rejection and humiliation and violation would be enough to make her disappear quietly. They had no idea what they'd actually created. A mother with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous thing in the world. The sun rose over Memphis like an accusation, harsh and unforgiving. Shanice hadn't slept. She'd spent the night researching, reading victim advocacy websites, learning the language of trauma and justice. Elijah slept peacefully beside her in a borrowed bassinet, unaware that her mother was preparing for war. At 8 in the morning, her phone rang. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. She let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. On the fourth call, she answered. What? Don't hang up. Please. His voice was raw, like he'd been crying. I need to tell you something. Unless you're calling to confess your own crimes, I don't want to hear it. I went to see him last night. I went to my father's apartment. Shanice sat up straighter. And? He wasn't there. The place was cleared out. Clothes gone, personal items gone. The moving building manager said a moving truck came around midnight. He's gone, Shanice. He ran. Of course he did. Men like Victor Reed don't face consequences. They evade them with money and connections and decades of practice. Your mother warned him, Shanice said flatly. I confronted her. She denied it, but I know she did. She's protecting him even now. Marcus's voice cracked. I can't believe she did this. I can't believe I keep thinking about that night. I left you alone with them. I chose a business meeting over my own wife. You chose a lot of things over your wife, Marcus. This was just the most devastating one. I want to help you find him. I have resources, private investigators, connections in law enforcement. You mean the same law enforcement that helped fake his death 3 years ago? The same system your family has been buying and manipulating for generations? Silence on the other end. That's what I thought, Shanice continued. Your help comes with strings, Marcus. It always has. You want to ease your guilt, but you don't actually want justice. Justice would mean admitting your whole family is complicit. It would mean your precious Reed name getting dragged through mud, and you're not ready for that. That's not fair. Fair? Shanice laughed bitterly. You want to talk about fair. Do you know what the rape kit examination feels like, Marcus? They did one at the hospital yesterday, 14 months too late, but the detective said it was important for the record. They photograph every inch of you. They swab and scrape and document. They treat your body like a crime scene because that's what it became. And you want to talk to me about fair. I heard him crying openly now. I'm sorry. God, Shanice, I'm so sorry. Stop apologizing and do something useful. If you really want to help, you'll get me the financial records. I want to know every property your family owns, every business account, every shell company. If your father is hiding, he's doing it with Reed money. Your money. I'll get them. I promise. But Shanice, about Elijah's medical care, I meant what I said. Whatever he needs, I'll pay for it. I don't want your money. He's still my nephew. He's still my blood. Please, let me do this one thing. Shanice looked at Elijah, at his tiny fingers curled into fists, at the slight wheeze in his breathing that the doctor said was related to his condition. Pride wouldn't keep him healthy. Pride wouldn't pay for the medication that cost more than she made in a month. Fine, but I want it in writing. A legal trust fund in Elijah's name that your family can never touch or control. And I want it set up by my attorney, not yours. Done. I'll have my accountant draw it up today. After she hung up, Mrs. Hayes appeared in the doorway with breakfast. You negotiating now? That's good. That's smart. I hate that I have to take anything from them. Pride don't pay medical bills, baby. You take what you need to take care of that child, and you don't apologize for it. Shanice forced herself to eat, though everything tasted like ashes. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Reed, this is Detective Angela Morrison. I've been assigned to your case. I'd like to meet with you today, if possible. We need to discuss your statement and next steps. Finally, movement, action, justice starting to take its first stumbling steps. They met at a coffee shop in Midtown, far from the Reed family's usual haunts.
Detective Morrison was a black woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She ordered them both coffee and slid a folder across the table. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Reed. This case is complicated. Because the Reeds are rich? Because your assault happened 14 months ago. There's no physical evidence, and the main suspect has disappeared. Your mother-in-law's testimony is crucial, but she's already lawyered up and isn't talking. So that's it? He just gets away with it? I didn't say that. Detective Morrison opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. Victor Reed didn't just fake his death and assault you. He's been busy. We found 3 other women who filed complaints against a man matching his description. Different names, different cities, same pattern. Wealthy older man, drugged drinks, memory loss. Shanice's stomach churned. 3 others? That we know of. There could be more. Most victims don't report, especially when the perpetrator has money and power. Detective Morrison pulled out a photo. This woman, Jasmine Chen, filed a report in Nashville 6 months ago. She was working as a real estate agent, met a client named Sterling Matthews, who asked her to show him properties after hours. She remembers having wine to celebrate a potential sale. She woke up in her car 12 hours later with no memory and evidence of assault. The photo showed a young Asian woman with kind eyes and a professional smile. Shanice's heart broke for her. In these 2? She pointed at 2 other photos. Kendra Williams in Little Rock and Trinity Ross right here in Memphis. Both similar stories. Both met a charming older man who called himself different names. Both woke up with missing time and trauma they couldn't fully remember. Have you talked to them? I've reached out. They're all willing to testify if we can find him and build a case. But Mrs. Reed, I need you to understand something. These cases are hard to prosecute even with perfect evidence. With your situation, married to his son, at a family event, alcohol involved, defense attorneys will tear you apart. They'll say it was consensual. They'll say you regretted it and cried rape. They'll destroy your character. Let them try. Shanice's voice was steel. I'm not hiding anymore. Detective Morrison smiled slightly. Good, because I'm going to need you to be strong. We're going to find Victor Reed, and we're going to make sure he faces what he's done. But it's going to get ugly before it gets better. It's already ugly. At least now I'm fighting back. That afternoon, Shanice met with an attorney named Imani Brooks. Imani specialized in sexual assault cases and had a reputation for taking on powerful defendants. She was a short woman with natural hair and fire in her eyes. I'm taking your case pro bono, Imani announced after hearing Shanice's story, because fuck the Reeds and everything they represent. Sorry, I don't usually curse in client meetings, but this one deserves it. Despite everything, Shanice laughed. It felt foreign, wrong, but also necessary. Here's what we're going to do, Imani continued, spreading out documents. We're filing a civil suit against Victor Reed, Claudette Reed, and the Reed Family Trust. Assault, conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and fraud regarding the staged death. We're going after their money, their reputation, and their sense of safety. What about criminal charges? Detective Morrison is handling that. Criminal and civil are separate tracks. Criminal puts him in prison. Civil bankrupts him and his enablers. We want both. Claudette will fight this with everything she has. Let her. She participated in a conspiracy to cover up multiple sexual assaults. She helped a wanted man evade justice. She set up her own daughter-in-law to be victimized. No jury in the world will sympathize with her once they hear the full story. Shanice felt something unfamiliar rising in her chest. Hope. Not the naive hope she'd carried into her marriage, but something harder, more realistic. The hope that comes from taking action, from refusing to be silent. When do we start? We already have. I'm filing the paperwork today. Imani leaned forward. But Shanice, I need you to prepare yourself. They're going to come after you hard. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made, every ex-boyfriend, every bad decision. They'll try to paint you as a opportunist who seduced an old man and cried foul when you didn't get what you wanted.
I know. Do you? Because I've seen strong women crumble under this type of scrutiny. The media will be brutal. Social media will be worse. You'll have strangers calling you a liar, a gold digger, a whore. Can you handle that? Shanice looked at Elijah, sleeping peacefully in his carrier. For him, I can handle anything. The story broke 2 days later. A local journalist named Tasha Williams, who'd been investigating the Reed family for months on an unrelated corruption story, got wind of the lawsuit and ran with it. Local businessman accused of multiple assaults, Reed family implicated in cover-up. The headline exploded across Memphis. News vans appeared outside Mrs. Hayes' house. Reporters called Shanice's phone constantly. Social media erupted with hot takes and conspiracy theories. Marcus released a statement through his attorney. I am horrified by the allegations against my father and deeply regret not protecting my wife when she needed me the most. I fully support her pursuit of justice and will cooperate with all investigations. Claudette's statement was different. These allegations are false and motivated by financial greed. My husband died 3 years ago. Any claims to the contrary are delusional. I will vigorously defend myself against these baseless accusations. The lies were so blatant, so transparent, that Shanice almost admired the audacity. The public response was divided. Some people rallied around Shanice, creating hashtags like Believe Shanice and Reed Family Secrets. Others called her a liar, said she was chasing money, claimed she'd willingly slept with her father-in-law and regretted it. The comments cut deep, but Shanice learned to stop reading them. She focused on what mattered: caring for Elijah, working with her legal team, connecting with the other victims. She met Jasmine Shen at a small cafe in Nashville. The two women sat across from each other, survivors of the same monster, and shared their stories. They cried together. They raged together. They promised each other they wouldn't let Victor Reed win. He took something from us, Jasmine said, her voice shaking. But he didn't take everything. We're still here. We're still fighting. Kendra and Trinity joined them remotely via video call. 4 women, different ages, different backgrounds, connected by trauma and determination. We need to go public together, Trinity suggested. She was a teacher, soft-spoken, but with steel underneath. That's risky, Jasmine warned. We'll be exposed to even more scrutiny. We're already exposed, Shanice countered. At least this way, we control the narrative. They decided to do a joint interview with Tasha Williams, the journalist who'd broken the initial story. The interview aired on a Sunday evening, prime time, and broke ratings records. 4 women, sitting side by side, telling their stories with clarity and courage. No dramatics, no hysteria, just facts, dates, locations, details that matched too perfectly to be a coincidence. The impact was immediate. More women came forward. 6 more victims of Sterling Matthews, Victor Reed, whatever name he'd used. A pattern spanning 15 years and 4 states. The FBI got involved. Interstate crimes, pattern of behavior, financial fraud related to his fake death. Suddenly, Victor Reed was wanted on federal charges, not just state ones. Claudette's facade cracked. Her attorney quit. Her friends stopped calling. She was photographed leaving her mansion looking haggard, her designer clothes hanging loose, her perfect hair unkempt. Julian called Shanice one evening. She's falling apart. Mother won't eat, won't sleep. She just sits in Dad's study, drinking and crying. Am I supposed to feel sorry for her? No, I just thought you should know. She's talking about testifying against him. If they find him, she'll tell prosecutors everything. Shanice felt a grim satisfaction. Good. She should face consequences too. They're offering her immunity if she cooperates. Of course they are. The system always protects people like her. Shanice, I know you're angry. Angry doesn't begin to cover what I am, Julian. Your mother set me up to be raped. There's no statute of limitations on my rage. 2 weeks later, Victor Reed was found, not in Mexico or the Caribbean where everyone assumed he'd fled, but in a cabin in rural Arkansas, just 3 hours from Memphis.
He'd been there the whole time, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the heat to die down. It didn't die down. It intensified. When the FBI arrested him, the footage went viral. An older man with dyed hair and a fake beard, looking nothing like the distinguished Victor Reed from his society photos. He looked ordinary, pathetic, small. The man who destroyed so many lives was just a coward who couldn't face what he'd done. His arraignment was a media circus. Cameras everywhere, protesters outside the courthouse, victims holding signs that read "Justice for Shanice" and "Believe Survivors." Victor pleaded not guilty to all charges. His attorney, a expensive shark from New York, argued that these were consensual encounters that women later regretted. He blamed Claudette for the conspiracy theories about faked death. He painted his client as a victim of vindictive women and a gold-digging daughter-in-law. The preliminary hearing lasted 3 days. Shanice testified, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. She described waking up with no memory. She described the pregnancy test that came back positive. She described Marcus's rejection and Claudette's cruelty. She looked directly at Victor Reed while she spoke. He wouldn't meet her eyes. The other victims testified too, a parade of women, each with similar stories, each piece adding to a mosaic of predatory behavior. The judge ruled there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Victor Reed's bail was set at $5 million. Marcus refused to pay it. Claudette couldn't. Her assets were frozen pending the civil suit. Victor Reed would await trial in jail, just like any other criminal. Justice was slow, imperfect, and incomplete, but it was moving forward. Shanice returned to Mrs. Hayes' house, exhausted but relieved. Elijah was awake, smiling his toothless baby smile, reaching for her with tiny hands. "Hey, baby boy," she whispered, lifting him into her arms. "Mama had a good day. We're winning. Slowly, painfully, but we're winning." Mrs. Hayes appeared with dinner. "You need to eat. Keep your strength up." "I'm tired of being strong." "Being tired and being strong ain't mutually exclusive, baby. You can be both." That night, Shanice allowed herself to imagine a future beyond this nightmare. A future where Elijah grew up healthy and loved. A future where she rebuilt her life on her own terms. A future where Victor Reed was just a bad memory, locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone else. It wasn't the future she dreamed of when she married Marcus. It was smaller, harder, more uncertain. But it was hers. And that made all the difference. 3 months passed like a storm, violent, unpredictable, and transformative. The trial date was set for early spring, giving both sides time to prepare their cases. For Shanice, those months were a strange mixture of mundane motherhood and legal warfare. Elijah was thriving despite everything. The medication Marcus had funded was working. The specialist said his development was on track, that with continued treatment, he'd likely live without major complications. Every smile, every milestone felt like a small victory against the darkness of his conception. Shanice had moved into a small apartment in the Cooper Young neighborhood, a bohemian area filled with artists and young families. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, creaky floors, a kitchen barely big enough for one person. But it was hers. No Reed money had paid for it. She'd used donations from a GoFundMe campaign that strangers had started after her interview aired. The outpouring of support had been overwhelming. Women from across the country sent money, sent messages, sent their own stories of survival. Shanice read every single one, cried over most of them, and found strength in the sisterhood of shared trauma. But not everyone was supportive. The backlash was vicious and organized. Pro-Reed groups formed on social media, claiming the whole thing was a conspiracy to destroy a prominent black family. They accused Shanice of being a plant, a tool of white supremacy, someone trying to tear down successful black men. The accusations stung, precisely because they touched on real fears.
Shanice knew the history, how black men have been falsely accused for generations, how the criminal justice system disproportionately targeted black communities. She understood why some people were skeptical. But Victor Reed wasn't innocent. The evidence wasn't fabricated, and believing survivors didn't mean abandoning the fight against systemic racism. It meant refusing to let any predator hide behind the community's justified distrust of authority. Imani, her attorney, had prepared her for this. They'll try to make this about race instead of about rape. They'll say you're helping the system destroy a black family. Don't let them twist your truth. One afternoon, Shanice received a visitor she wasn't expecting. A woman in her 60s, elegantly dressed, with silver hair and Victor Reed's eyes. She knocked on the apartment door with the confidence of someone used to being welcomed everywhere. "My name is Dorothy Reed. I'm Victor's sister," she said when Shanice opened the door. Shanice's hand tightened on the doorframe. "You need to leave. Please, just 5 minutes. I'm not here to defend him. I'm here to apologize." Against her better judgment, Shanice let her in. They sat across from each other in the small living room, Elijah playing on a blanket between them. Dorothy looked at the baby for a long time. "He has the Reed eyes. My father had eyes like that. My grandfather too. What do you want?" "To tell you that I believe you, and to tell you that Victor wasn't always a monster, though I know that doesn't excuse anything." "You're right. It doesn't." Dorothy pulled out an old photograph from her purse. It showed 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 6 and 8 years old, standing in front of a modest house. "That's us. Before the money, before the business, before everything got twisted." Shanice didn't want to hear a humanizing story. She didn't want to see Victor Reed as anything other than the monster who'd destroyed her life. But Dorothy continued anyway. "Our father was violent, beat us both, but especially Victor. Told him he'd never amount to anything, that he was worthless. Victor spent his whole life trying to prove him wrong. He built an empire, created wealth, gave his family everything he never had. And then he started hurting women." "Yes." Dorothy's voice cracked. "The first time I suspected something was wrong was about 20 years ago. A young secretary filed a complaint against him. Said he'd cornered her at a company party. The complaint disappeared. So much money changed hands, and the girl left town." "You knew." "I suspected. I didn't want to know for certain, because knowing would have meant doing something about it. And I was a coward." Dorothy wiped tears from her eyes. "I'm here because I'm testifying against him. The prosecutors contacted me. They want to establish pattern of behavior, and I can give them 20 years of suspicions, hints, women who disappeared from his orbit under mysterious circumstances." "Why now? Why not years ago when you could have stopped him?" "Because I was protecting my family, my nieces, my nephews, the Reed name. I told myself that the women were probably lying, that Victor would never, but I knew. Deep down, I always knew." Shanice felt a familiar rage building. "Your silence enabled him. Every woman he hurt after that secretary, that's partially on you." "I know." Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. "I know, and I'll carry that guilt until I die. But I'm here now. I'm testifying. I'm giving prosecutors everything I know. It won't undo the damage, but maybe it will prevent him from hurting anyone else." After Dorothy left, Shanice sat in the silence of her apartment and wondered about complicity. How many people had suspected? How many had chosen comfort over courage? How many times had Victor Reed's crimes been enabled by people who simply didn't want to look too closely? Clannette had finally agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. Her deposition was leaked to the press, and it was devastating. She detailed how Victor had faked his death with help from a corrupt police detective and a compliant medical examiner. She described his gambling debts, his violence, his pattern of predatory behavior. But she also revealed something that shook everyone.
Victor had another family, a whole other life in Little Rock with a woman named Carmen and 2 teenage daughters who had no idea their father was a bigamist and a rapist. The revelation exploded across news cycles. Claudette and her daughters gave interviews, their faces blurred, their voices disguised. They were victims too, trapped in a lie they'd never consented to. Marcus called Shanice after the news broke. "Did you know about this?" "About what, Marcus? About your father being worse than we even imagined?" "No, but I'm not surprised. Monsters don't stop at one crime. They build entire lives around deception." "I have half-sisters I never knew about. How is that possible? How did we miss this?" "You missed it because you didn't want to see it. Your whole family has been performing selective blindness for decades." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I'm in therapy now, trying to understand how I became complicit in all of this." "Good. You should be." "Elijah, how is he?" "Healthy, happy, growing." "Can I see him?" The question hung in the air. Shanice had been avoiding this. Marcus was funding Elijah's medical care, but she'd kept him at a distance, refusing visits, communicating only through attorneys. "Why?" she asked finally. "Because he's my nephew. Because I failed him, and I want to do better. Because I know I don't deserve a relationship with him, but I'm asking anyway." Shanice looked at Elijah, who was pulling himself up on the coffee table, wobbling on unsteady legs. He was trying to stand, falling, trying again with the determination of someone who didn't know failure was an option. "One visit," she said, "supervised. You step out of line once and you're gone." Marcus arrived the next Saturday morning with toys. Too many toys, expensive educational things that probably cost more than Shanice's monthly rent. He stood in the doorway awkwardly, this man who'd once commanded rooms with his presence, now uncertain and small. "Thank you for letting me come." Shanice didn't respond. She just stepped aside and let him in. Marcus sat on the floor, and Elijah, with the fearless curiosity of babies, crawled over to investigate. He pulled himself up using Marcus's knee, looked at his face with serious concentration, then smiled. Marcus's face crumpled. He pulled Elijah into a gentle hug and cried. "I'm so sorry," he whispered to the baby who couldn't understand. "I'm so sorry for how I failed you, for what I said in that hospital, for everything." Shanice watched from across the room, her emotions tangled. She hated Marcus for his weakness, for his complicity, for choosing his family over his wife. But she also saw genuine remorse. She saw a man trying to crawl out of the pit his family had dug. "He looks like you," Marcus said, wiping his eyes. "More than he looks like—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "He's his own person, not defined by either of you. I want to be in his life, not as a father, I know I have no right to that, but as an uncle, as someone who helps support him, who shows up for birthdays and school plays. I want to do better. Words are easy, Marcus. Show me through actions, consistently, for years. Maybe then we'll talk about a real relationship." The visit lasted an hour. Marcus played with Elijah, made him laugh with silly faces, and read him board books in different character voices. For those 60 minutes, he was present in a way he'd never been during their marriage. When he left, Shanice felt something shift inside her. Not forgiveness, she wasn't anywhere close to that, but maybe the possibility of coexistence. Maybe the understanding that people could change, even if that change came too late to save what was broken. The trial began on a cold March morning. The courthouse was surrounded by protesters on both sides, survivors holding signs supporting Shanice and the other victims, and Reed supporters claiming the whole thing was a witch hunt. Security was tight. Threats had been made against Shanice, against the other victims, against the judge. Victor Reed had spent his months in jail building alliances, calling in favors, trying to manipulate the system one last time.
The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented medical evidence, testimony from the other victims, financial records showing Victor's pattern of payoffs, and communication records proving Claudette's complicity. Dorothy Reed testified with quiet dignity, describing decades of suspicions and ignored warning signs. "I enabled him by staying silent," she told the jury, "and I will regret that cowardice for the rest of my life." Claudette testified next, her immunity deal protecting her from criminal charges, but not from public shame. She described how Victor had manipulated her, how he had threatened to destroy their children if she didn't help him, how she'd convinced herself that protecting the family name was more important than protecting the women he hurt. "I was wrong," she said, crying on the stand. "I was so terribly wrong, and I'm sorry." Shanice's testimony came on the fourth day. She walked to the stand in a simple blue dress, her head high, her voice steady. She told her story without embellishment or drama, just facts. The gala, the champagne, the missing hours, the pregnancy, and the rejection. Victor's attorney tried to rattle her during cross-examination. "Isn't it true you were unhappy in your marriage?" "Yes." "And isn't it true you had the opportunity to be with a wealthy, powerful man?" "I had the opportunity to be drugged and raped by my husband's father. That's not an opportunity. That's a crime." "But you can't remember that night clearly, can you?" "I can't remember it because he put something in my drink. That's not consent, that's assault." The attorney tried different angles, suggesting she'd wanted an affair, that she'd seduced Victor, that she'd fabricated the whole thing for money. But Shanice didn't break. She'd been preparing for this for months, and she wasn't going to let some lawyer twist her truth. The other victims testified too, each adding their piece to the larger picture. By the time the prosecution rested, the pattern was undeniable. Victor's defense was weak. He took the stand and claimed all the encounters were consensual, that these women were lying for money, that his own family had turned against him out of greed. He painted himself as the victim of a conspiracy. The jury didn't buy it. After 6 days of testimony and 12 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict. Guilty on all counts. Multiple counts of sexual assault, fraud, conspiracy, and a dozen other charges. The courtroom erupted. Shanice felt Imani's hands squeeze hers. She felt tears streaming down her face, not tears of joy exactly, but of relief, of vindication, of finally being believed. Victor Reed was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. At 63 years old, it was essentially a life sentence. He would die in prison, forgotten and alone. His empire crumbled, his name synonymous with predation. The civil case settled 2 weeks later. The Reed Family Trust agreed to pay $8 million, divided among the victims. Claudette lost her mansion, her social standing, her comfortable life. She moved into a small condo and gave no more interviews. Marcus kept his promise. He showed up for Elijah consistently, week after week, building a relationship based on presence rather than blood. He started a foundation for sexual assault survivors, donating significant portions of his wealth to support legal services and therapy. It didn't fix what he'd done, it didn't undo the pain, but it was something. Shanice used her portion of the settlement to buy a house. Nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom in a good school district with the backyard where Elijah could play. She went back to school for her master's degree in counseling, specializing in trauma therapy. She wanted to help other survivors navigate the aftermath of violence, to be the support system she'd needed and rarely found. 2 years after the trial, she stood in her backyard watching Elijah chase butterflies. He was 3 now, healthy and happy, with Marcus's features and Shanice's spirit. He knew his story, age-appropriate versions of it. He knew that his father had hurt people and was in prison. He knew that his mother was strong and fought for justice. "Mama, look!" Elijah called, pointing at a monarch butterfly landing on a flower. "I see it, baby. It's beautiful." Mrs. Hayes, who had become a permanent fixture in their lives, brought out lemonade. "You did good, Shanice. Look at this life you built." "We built it. I couldn't have done any of this alone." "Maybe not, but you had the courage to start. That's what mattered." That evening, after Elijah was asleep, Shanice sat on her porch and wrote in the journal her therapist had encouraged her to keep. She wrote about the trial, about the settlement, about the strange peace that had settled over her life. She wrote, "I used to think healing meant forgetting, that moving on required leaving the past behind. But I was wrong. Healing means integrating the trauma into who you are without letting it define you. It means acknowledging what happened while refusing to be destroyed by it. I will always carry scars from what Victor Reed did to me. I will always have complicated feelings about Marcus and the family that failed me. But I also carry strength I didn't know I had. I carry the knowledge that I survived, that I fought, that I protected my son and helped other women find justice. That's not nothing. That's everything." She closed the journal and looked up at the stars. Somewhere in a prison cell, Victor Reed was learning what it meant to have no power, no control, no ability to hurt anyone else. The thought didn't bring her joy, she'd never been interested in revenge, but it brought her peace. The worst kind of pain, she had learned, wasn't physical. It was the kind that shattered you internally while everyone stared, judged, and applauded your downfall. But the best kind of strength wasn't the kind that prevented breaking. It was the kind that helped you rebuild, piece by piece, into something more resilient than you'd ever been before. Shanice had been shattered, but she hadn't stayed broken. And that made all the difference. This was Shanice's story, a story of betrayal, survival, and justice. Did it move you? Which part resonated most? Let me know in the comments and tell me which city you're listening from. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. There are more stories like this on my channel, stories of strength, courage, and survival. Thank you for listening. And remember, your voice matters, your story matters, and you are never alone.